Welcome to tonight's journey into the spaces between memory and silence. Before we begin, if this story brings you peace, if these words guide you gently into rest, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. It helps others find their way here, to this quiet place we're about to visit together. Now, settle deeply into your pillow, let your body sink into the comfort beneath you, and allow me to take you to a city with no name, a place that exists in the hour before dawn, where something profound happened in absolute silence. There is a city by the sea, and it has no name, or perhaps it has so many names that none of them matter anymore, names whispered in languages that have grown quiet, syllables that once meant home and market and temple and harbor, but now mean nothing because there is no one left to speak them. The city sits where it has always sat, stone pressed against stone, walls rising from the earth with the patient solidity of things built to last forever. And the sea breathes against those walls the way it has breathed for centuries, each wave a gentle exhalation that asks nothing and expects nothing and simply continues because that is what the sea does. It continues, regardless of what happens on the land. It is the hour before dawn. That particular quality of darkness that is not quite night anymore but has not yet surrendered to day, when the world exists in shades of gray and deep blue, when shadows lose their sharp edges and everything softens into a kind of universal dimness where the boundary between sea and sky becomes uncertain, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for the sun to decide whether today is worth beginning. The wind moves through the empty streets with a sound like distant conversation, words you almost recognize but cannot quite make out, and it carries the smell of salt and stone and something else, something harder to name, the scent of absence, of spaces that were once filled but now stand hollow. The gates of the city are open. This is important. They are not broken or torn from their hinges or burnt or shattered by some violent force. They are simply open, standing wide as if waiting for someone to enter, or perhaps as if the last person to leave did not bother to close them behind them. And now they stand as a question mark, an invitation to emptiness, a doorway that leads to rooms where no one lives. The great wooden doors, carved with symbols that once meant protection and welcome and the favor of gods whose names are still carved into the wood but whose presence has departed like morning mist when the sun finally rises, these doors rest against the stone walls, patient and useless, serving no purpose because there is nothing left to keep in and nothing left to keep out. Inside the walls, the city spreads itself in neat geometric patterns, streets that intersect at right angles, plazas where fountains once played and now sit silent with their basins dry, their stone lips no longer speaking water into the air, and houses that stand shoulder to shoulder like old friends who have run out of things to say to each other. The houses are intact. Their roofs still keep out the rain. Their walls still stand plump and true. Their doors, like the city gates, hang open or stand ajar. And through those doorways you can see the rooms within, furniture still arranged for living, tables where meals were eaten, chairs where people sat, beds where they slept, all of it waiting as if the inhabitants have merely stepped out for a moment and will return when the sun rises, though the sun has risen many times since anyone walked these streets, and it will rise many more times before anything changes. On one of those tables, in a house near the center of the city, there is bread, and this bread is neither fresh nor moldy, neither edible nor completely ruined, but exists in some state between, as if time itself has become confused about how quickly it should pass, as if the normal rules of decay and dissolution have been suspended or slowed or simply forgotten. Next to the bread there is a cup, and in the cup there is wine that has not turned to vinegar but has also not remained drinkable. And the wine catches what little light comes through the window and holds it there, a small pool of dark red that looks almost like blood but is not blood, is only wine, only the remnants of someone's last meal, interrupted and never finished and never cleared away. In another house there are toys scattered on the floor, Small wooden animals carved with care. A ball made of wound cloth. A doll with a painted face whose smile seems sad now in the gray light. Or perhaps the smile was always sad and it is only now, in the absence of the child who played with it, that the sadness becomes visible. The toys are not arranged in the chaos of play but in the stillness of abandonment, as if the child who was playing with them simply stopped mid-game and walked away, and the toys have been waiting ever since for hands that will not return to pick them up again. The marketplace is empty. The stalls still stand with their wooden frames and canvas covers, some of the canvas torn now by wind and weather, flapping with a sound like tired wings, but the structure remains. The skeleton of commerce, the bones of exchange, places where merchants once called out their wares and customers haggled over prices and coins changed hands and goods moved from seller to buyer in the endless dance of human transaction. But there are no goods now. The tables are bare. No fruit piled in careful pyramids, no cloth folded in neat stacks. No pots or tools or trinkets or any of the thousand things that people need or want or simply buy because buying is what you do in a marketplace. Just empty tables and the wind moving through the stalls like a shopper who cannot find anything worth purchasing. The harbor curves along the edge of the city where the land meets the sea, and the docks reach out into the water like fingers testing the temperature, wooden piers supported by posts driven deep into the seabed. And these docks are solid still, not rotted, not collapsed, but empty of the ships that once tied up alongside them, empty of the sailors who once walked their length carrying cargo and stories from distant ports, empty of the merchants who waited to receive that cargo, empty of the prostitutes and thieves and honest workers and all the human ecosystem that grows around any port where ships come and go. The water laps against the posts with a sound that is almost speech, a rhythm that suggests meaning without quite achieving it. And if you listen long enough you might start to hear words in that rhythm, might start to believe the sea is trying to tell you something. But whatever message it carries is in a language you do not speak and cannot learn. There are birds. Not many, but some. Gulls mostly, circling overhead or perched on the walls, and they cry out with voices that sound like questions, harsh and insistent, asking where everyone went, asking why the harbor is empty, asking if there will be fish guts today or scraps of bread or any of the incidental food that humans provide simply by being human, by being messy and wasteful and alive. But there are no answers to their questions, and after a while they stop asking and simply circle in silence, riding the wind currents with wings that barely move, conserving energy, waiting for something that they cannot name but will recognize when it appears, if it ever appears. The temples stand in the highest part of the city, as temples always do, reaching toward the sky as if proximity to heaven makes prayers more likely to be heard. There are several temples, dedicated to different gods, and they are built in different styles reflecting different eras of the city's history, but they all share certain features: the steps leading up to their entrances, the columns supporting their roofs, the altars where offerings were made, the spaces designed to make humans feel small in the presence of something vast and powerful and worthy of worship. The temple doors, unlike the doors of houses, are closed, not locked but simply shut, as if whoever last left them wanted to preserve some dignity, some separation between the sacred and the profane, even in abandonment. But if you were to push open those temple doors, if you were to climb those steps and press your weight against the wood until the hinges gave way with a sound like a sigh, you would find inside not darkness but a gray light filtering through high windows, and in that light you would see the altars bare of offerings, the floors unswept, the walls where once there hung tapestries and offerings and prayers written on cloth or carved in stone, now mostly empty, and the emptiness would feel different from the emptiness of the houses, more profound somehow, more final, as if the absence here is not just of people but of something else, something that has no physical form but whose lack can be felt like a cold draft in a sealed room. The altars where once there burned fires that never went out, eternal flames tended by priests who dedicated their lives to keeping that connection alive between earth and heaven, between human and divine. These altars are cold now, the ash long since blown away by wind that enters through cracks in the walls, through spaces where stone no longer quite meets stone, and what remains is just shaped stone, carefully carved and positioned but no longer serving any purpose, no longer a gateway or a telephone line or whatever metaphor you prefer for the way humans try to reach beyond themselves towards something greater. On the walls of one temple there are paintings, faded now but still visible, depicting stories of the gods, their deeds and their loves and their wars and their interventions in human affairs, the usual mythology that every culture creates to explain why things are the way they are, why the sun rises and sets, why the crops grow or fail, why some people prosper and others suffer, why there is meaning or at least the appearance of meaning in what might otherwise be random chaos. The paintings show gods with human faces but larger than human, with expressions of benevolence or wrath or indifference, and they show humans kneeling or standing or reaching up toward those divine figures, and the whole composition suggests a relationship, an exchange, a conversation between two types of beings, but the suggestion is faded now, the colors muted, the details obscured by time and dust and the simple fact that no one has looked at these paintings with believing eyes for a very long time. There are no bodies. This is crucial. In the streets, in the houses, in the temples, in the marketplace, in the harbor, nowhere in the entire city are there bodies, no skeletons, no remains, no evidence of death by violence or disease or any of the usual causes that empty cities. No battle was fought here. No plague swept through. No fire consumed the buildings or earthquake shook them down or flood swept them away. The city stands intact, and the people are simply gone, as if they all decided on the same day to walk out through those open gates and not come back. And whatever made them decide this left no mark, no sign, no explanation carved in stone or written on paper or passed down in stories because there is no one left to pass anything down to. In the houses, in drawers, in chests, there are clothes still folded, tools still organized, money still in its hiding places, all the valuable and semi-valuable possessions that people accumulate over lifetimes of living, and none of it has been taken, none of it has been disturbed except by the slow, patient work of dust and air and time, and this suggests that whatever made people leave was not about saving their possessions, was not about carrying wealth to some new location, but was about something else, something that made possessions irrelevant, something that made the distinction between valuable and worthless cease to matter. The bells in the temple towers are silent. In most cities there is a rhythm to the day marked by bells, the calling of hours, the summoning to prayer, the announcement of important events, weddings and funerals and festivals and warnings, and the bells become part of the city's voice, part of its identity, and their absence is like the absence of a heartbeat, a silence where there should be sound, a stillness where there should be rhythm. The bells themselves still hang in their towers, bronze shapes suspended by ropes, and if you were to climb those towers and pull those ropes, the bells would ring. Their voices would carry across the empty streets and out over the water, but there is no one to climb the towers, no one to pull the ropes, no one to hear the bells if they rang, and so they hang in silence, waiting for hands that do not come. What happened in the city happened slowly, so slowly that it might have been hard to notice if you lived through it. Changes so gradual that each day felt like the day before with only the smallest variations. The kind of drift that you only recognize when you look back and compare where you started to where you ended and realize that somehow, without any single dramatic moment, everything changed. It began, if it can be said to have begun at any particular moment, with the prayers. People still came to the temples. They still went through the motions. They still bowed their heads and spoke the words and made the offerings. But somewhere in that routine, something shifted. The words that had once carried weight, that had once felt like they were reaching beyond the speaker towards some listening presence, these words became just words, sounds made from habit, syllables repeated because that is what you do at certain times in certain places, but no longer containing the belief that gave them meaning. And the gods, whatever the gods are, wherever they exist or don't exist, in heaven or in the collective imagination or in the quantum foam of possibility, the gods notice this change the way you might notice that someone you care about has stopped really listening when you talk, that they are present in body but absent in attention, that they nod and smile and say the appropriate things but are not truly there, not truly engaged, not truly participating in the relationship that once connected you. And the gods, being gods, did not respond with anger or punishment or the dramatic gestures that myths are made of, the lightning bolts and floods and plagues and turning people into trees or animals or pillars of salt. Instead, they simply began to withdraw, to pull back, to recede like a tide that is gentle and slow and gives you plenty of time to follow it if you want to. But if you don't follow, if you stay on the beach, eventually you find yourself standing on dry sand with the water far away and growing more distant with each passing moment. The priests noticed first, because priests are trained to notice such things, to pay attention to the quality of sacred space, to the feeling of presence or absence in their temples. They noticed that the prayers felt different, that the silence after prayer was no longer the pregnant silence of waiting for a response but the empty silence of speaking into a void. They noticed that the omens they read in smoke and entrails and the flight of birds no longer seemed to mean anything, or if they meant something, the meaning was obscure, ambiguous, subject to interpretation in so many ways that it ceased to be useful as guidance. They noticed that miracles stopped happening, not all at once but gradually, the small everyday miracles that believers rely on to maintain faith, the answered prayers, the unexpected recoveries, the fortunate coincidences that seem like signs of divine favor. These slowly dried up like a spring that fails, and what was left was just the ordinary operation of cause and effect, probability and chance, with no supernatural intervention to tip the scales. Some of the priests tried to sound the alarm. They spoke to the people, reminding them of their duties, of the importance of proper worship, of the dangers of neglecting the gods. They organized festivals and ceremonies, elaborate rituals designed to recapture whatever had been lost, to reignite the connection that seemed to be fading. And people came to these festivals because festivals were part of the social fabric, because they were occasions to gather and celebrate and take a break from ordinary life, and they went through the rituals with varying degrees of sincerity, but underneath the surface activity, underneath the singing and dancing and offering and prayer, there was a hollowness, a sense that they were performing a play for an audience that had left the theater. Other priests responded differently. They began to doubt their own perceptions, to wonder if they had imagined the presence they thought they felt before, if perhaps the gods had never been there in the first place and what they had mistaken for divine presence was just their own projection, their own need for meaning and purpose and connection to something larger than themselves. These priests gradually stopped performing their duties with the same conviction, and some eventually stopped performing them at all, setting aside their vestments and walking away from the temples to pursue other ways of living. And when they did, no one stopped them. No divine punishment fell upon them. They simply became ordinary citizens of the city, indistinguishable from anyone else. And the temples they left behind continued to function but with less energy, less certainty, less of whatever quality it is that makes sacred space feel different from profane space. The people themselves, the ordinary citizens who were neither priests nor particularly devout but who participated in religious life the way most people do, as part of the background of their existence, they too noticed changes though they might not have articulated them in the same way the priests did. They noticed that their prayers for healing or prosperity or protection seemed to have about the same effect as not praying, that the outcomes of their lives seemed to correlate more with their own efforts and decisions than with divine intervention, that luck and randomness played larger roles than favor or disfavor of the gods. And this realization, when it came, was not dramatic or frightening but almost liberating, a sense that they were on their own, that their lives were their own responsibility, that whatever happened to them was a result of natural causes and human choices rather than the inscrutable will of capricious deities. And so, gradually, over years rather than days or weeks, the city became secular in the deepest sense, not hostile to religion but simply indifferent to it, treating the temples as historical monuments rather than active sites of worship, visiting them occasionally for their aesthetic or architectural interest but not to pray, not to offer, not to seek connection with the divine. The festivals continued but they became more social than religious, celebrations of community rather than worship of gods, and the stories told about the gods became entertainment rather than sacred narrative, myths appreciated for their literary value rather than their truth value. The gods, receiving less attention, less belief, less of whatever energy or acknowledgement or faith it is that sustains them, began to fade. Not all at once, not with any dramatic farewell. They simply became less present, less real, less relevant to the lives of the people who once worshipped them. And as they faded, something else happened in the city, something subtle but profound. The sense of meaning began to shift. Where once people had understood their lives as part of a larger divine plan, as playing roles in a cosmic drama scripted by the gods, now they had to find meaning in smaller, more local, more human terms. Their relationships with each other became more important. Their own goals and desires and projects became the focus of their energy. They built and created and traded and loved and fought and made peace, all without reference to divine will or favor, and for a time this worked well enough. But meaning is a strange thing. It needs something to anchor to, some sense of significance beyond the immediate and the personal. When the gods were present, they provide that anchor. Human actions mattered because they pleased or displeased the divine. Human lives had significance because they were watched over by beings who cared about the outcome. Human suffering could be endured because it was part of a larger pattern that would eventually make sense, if not in this life then in whatever came after. But when the gods withdrew, that anchor was lost, and people had to find other ways to create meaning, or learn to live without it, or pretend that meaning was not important, that the simple fact of being alive was enough, that pleasure and pain and work and rest were their own justification. Some managed this well. They threw themselves into their crafts and their businesses and their families, finding satisfaction in doing things well, in creating beauty or wealth or happiness for themselves and those around them. They did not need gods to give their lives meaning because they could create meaning through their own efforts, through the relationships they built and the work they produced and the legacy they would leave behind. These people thrived in the city as it became more secular, more focused on the human rather than the divine, and they would have been surprised to learn that anything was being lost, because from their perspective, things were getting better, more rational, more under human control. But others struggled. They felt the absence of the divine as a wound, a hollowness at the center of their being that nothing human could fill. They tried to fill it with pleasure or work or relationships, but none of these satisfied the hunger for transcendence, for connection to something beyond the self, for assurance that existence had purpose beyond the immediate and the material. These people became restless, dissatisfied, always searching for something they could not name and could not find, and their dissatisfaction spread like a low-grade fever through the population, not dramatic enough to be called a crisis but persistent enough to change the character of the city, to make it feel less joyful, less certain, less like a place worth being. And then people started to leave. Not all at once. Not in a mass exodus, just a few at first. Individuals or families who decided they wanted to try their fortune elsewhere, who heard of opportunities in other cities or other lands and decided to take them. And then a few more. And then a few more. And each departure made it easier for the next person to leave, because communities have a kind of gravity. They hold people through the weight of connection and routine and familiarity. But when that gravity weakens, when enough people have left that the connections feel strained and the routines feel hollow and the familiar becomes just empty rather than comforting, then leaving becomes not a radical choice but a natural one. The obvious next step, the thing that makes sense. The city did not collapse. It did not fall to invasion or succumb to disease or suffer any catastrophic event. It simply emptied, gradually, like water draining from a basin. And each person who left probably had their own specific reasons: a better job elsewhere, family in another place, a desire for change or adventure or escape from whatever was not working in their current life. But underneath all those specific reasons was something larger, a collective sense that the city had lost something essential, that whatever had made it a place worth living had departed, and even if they could not articulate exactly what had been lost, they could feel its absence, could feel the city becoming hollow, and so they left. The last person to leave the city, whoever that was, probably did not know they were the last. They probably thought there were still others remaining, that they were just one more person making a personal choice, not the person who closed the door on 1,000 years of human habitation. They probably looked back at the city as they walked through the gates, perhaps with sadness or perhaps with relief or perhaps with a mixture of both, and then they turned and walked away, and the gate stood open behind them, and the city was empty. And the gods, watching from wherever gods watch from, if they watch at all, saw the city empty and felt neither triumph nor regret, because gods, if they are truly gods, are beyond such human emotions, or perhaps because gods, if they exist at all, exist only as reflections of human consciousness, and when that consciousness withdraws its attention, the gods simply cease to be, not destroyed but unmanifest, potential rather than actual, waiting for the next group of humans who will need them, badly enough to bring them into being again. The city remains. The stones are patient. They do not care whether they shelter humans or stand empty. They do not care whether prayers are offered or temples stand unused. They are just stone, doing what stone does, enduring, weathering, slowly wearing away, but at a pace so slow that from a human perspective they might as well be eternal. The sea continues to breathe against the walls. The wind continues to move through the empty streets. The sun rises and sets, and each day is like the day before, neither better nor worse, just another rotation of the planet, another cycle of light and dark. And if anyone were there to see it, they would see a beautiful city by the sea, well preserved and empty, waiting for nothing, because waiting implies expectation, and there is no expectation here, just existence, just the simple fact of being, which requires nothing and offers nothing and is perhaps the truest state of all. Now the gray light is beginning to change, very slowly, almost imperceptibly, the first hint of dawn approaching, though the sun has not yet shown itself over the horizon. The darkness is thinning, becoming translucent, and the sea is visible now as distinct from the sky, a line of demarcation that separates water from air. And on that water there are small waves, gentle movements that catch what little light there is and hold it for a moment before releasing it. And if you watch those waves long enough, your eyes begin to follow their rhythm, back and forth, and your breathing begins to match that rhythm without you consciously deciding to do so. And you find yourself becoming part of that movement, part of that rhythm, part of the slow, patient breathing of the sea. The city behind you, If you are standing at the water's edge looking out toward the horizon, the city is there, but you are not thinking about it anymore, not worrying about why it is empty or what happened to its people or whether the gods were real or whether meaning exists or any of the questions that seemed important before. You are just standing here, breathing with the sea, watching the light change, and everything else has become very distant, very quiet, very unimportant compared to this simple act of being present in this moment, in this place, with the cool air on your skin and the smell of salt in your nostrils and the sound of water moving against stone filling your ears. And perhaps this is what the city learned, what it had to teach, that meaning is not something given by gods or found in sacred texts or revealed through prayer, but something that arises in moments like this, when you are fully present, fully aware, fully alive to the simple fact of existence, and everything else, all the structures and stories and beliefs that humans build to make sense of their lives, all of it is just scaffolding, useful perhaps but not essential, and when it falls away, what remains is this, just this, the quiet awareness of being, the breath moving in and out, the heart beating its steady rhythm, the sense of yourself as part of the larger rhythm of the world, the waves and the wind and the slow turning of the planet. And this is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. The gods did not abandon the city in anger. They were not punishing anyone. They were not making a point or teaching a lesson. They simply faded when they were no longer needed, when the attention that sustained them was withdrawn and directed elsewhere. And their departure was as gentle as their presence had once been, neither violent nor dramatic, just a quiet withdrawal, a stepping back, a receding into whatever realm gods inhabit when they are not actively involved in human affairs. And the city, released from the weight of divine meaning, from the burden of cosmic significance, simply became itself, just stone and streets and buildings, just a place, neither sacred nor profane, neither blessed nor cursed, just existing in the same way that rocks exist and trees exist and the sea exists, without needing justification or purpose or explanation. And the people, scattered now to other places, other cities, other lives, they carry with them something learned in that nameless city by the sea, though they might not be able to articulate what they learned, might not even realize they learned anything at all. But somewhere in their consciousness, in the deep places where understanding lives below the level of words, they know something about the nature of meaning and presence and absence, about how the sacred is not fixed but fluid, not given but created, not eternal but contingent on attention and belief and the willingness to invest ordinary things with extraordinary significance. And they know, though again they might not be able to say how they know, that this is both liberating and terrifying, this responsibility for creating meaning rather than receiving it, this freedom to decide what matters rather than being told, this emptiness that is also fullness, this absence that is also presence. The city waits in the growing light, and waiting is perhaps the wrong word because waiting implies expectation and the city expects nothing. It simply is, continuing in its being without purpose or goal, and if someday people return, if someday the gates are filled again with traffic and the marketplace with goods and the temples with worshippers, the city will accommodate them just as it accommodates the emptiness now, with the same patient indifference, the same acceptance of whatever is, because stone does not choose, does not prefer, does not judge. It simply endures and provides structure and allows life to happen within it or not happen, with equal equanimity. The sun is very close now to breaking the horizon, and in these last moments of pre-dawn, everything is suspended in a state of perfect possibility, where anything might happen or nothing might happen and both outcomes are equally valid, equally real, equally part of the story that the universe tells itself about itself. The water is still, barely moving, a dark mirror reflecting the lightning sky, and the city behind stands as a shadow, a shape darker than the darkness, waiting for light to reveal its details or not caring whether light comes at all, content in its existence, whether seen or unseen, whether known or unknown, whether remembered or forgotten. Let your consciousness drift now. Let it float on the surface of that dark water, bobbing gently with the small waves, and feel how easy it is to simply float, to let go of the effort of understanding or analyzing or figuring out what things mean, to just be here in this moment, in this nameless city, in this hour before dawn, where nothing is required of you, nothing is expected, where you are free to simply exist without purpose or goal, just breathing and being and allowing the world to be what it is without needing to change it or fix it or make it make sense. The city will be here when you wake. Or it will not be here. Or perhaps it was never here at all. Just a dream, just a story told to ease you into sleep, just words arranged in patterns that create images in your mind. And whether the city is real or imagined matters less than what it represents. This space of quiet emptiness, this place where meaning has dissolved and what remains is just existence in its purest form, neither good nor bad, neither sacred nor profane, just being, just the simple fact of things continuing to be, breath after breath, wave after wave, moment after moment, and this is the rhythm that carries you now, down into sleep, down into the dark water, down into the place where questions dissolve and answers are unnecessary and there is only the deep quiet rest of being.